Before we get to Drew Davison on TCU, Craig, a couple more notes in the transfer portal as well. Jared Wiley, a tight end from Texas who played at Belton High School, Temple High School. He was a quarterback in high school, has entered the transfer portal as well, as we have kind of kept you up to that as we possibly can. Sonny Dykes, we had Sonny on last week. TCU signing date. There wasn't a lot to do because they kind of had this, on the way out, Gary Patterson. And then, of course, Sonny Dykes takes over late, and we're joined by Drew Davison, covers TCU for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram on Sikkim 365 Radio. So, Drew, what was actually the expectation? And thank God it's not just the first signing day period, but there's a second one as well, and a transfer portal. Do we have him?
Drew, you there?
Apparently not.
Hey, you got me?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. There you go.
Okay. So, sorry about that. But no, I was saying, if you ask Sonny Dykes, he did everything. He and the staff did everything they wanted. They added some guys they feel like can contribute, and some guys they feel like they can develop. It's a small class so far. It's only 9 guys, but they're also potentially going to add as many as 20 in the transfer portal. So I think that's kind of going to be their approach is smaller recruiting classes and also being able to poach the transfer portal. But overall, when you look at where the guys rank individually, they feel good and they feel like they acquired quite a bit of talent.
What do you think will happen at quarterback for them next year?
Well, Paul, I think it's going to be a wide open competition. I certainly don't think Max Duggan is the day one starter, just, based on, them opening it up, so to speak. But he'll be in the mix. Chandler Morris, of course, is going to be right there. But I do think they're going to add another quarterback via the portal. They signed a guy named Josh Hoover from Rockwall Heath, who they feel like has pretty good potential as well. But I don't know if he'd start quite yet as a true freshman, especially when you got a guy like Chandler Morris or Max Duggan who kind of have more experience. But I do think they're going to add at least one guy in the transfer portal, and I've already seen some people think it could be Casey Thompson, who just entered from Texas. So we'll kind of see how that shakes out, but I think it's anybody's guess right now as far as who wins the job.
So, Drew, 20 players out of the transfer portal, that's not nothing. That's the SMU philosophy in a kind of way, right? Sonny, he thrived on, getting the Tanner Mordecai's or any other number of D1 transfers. So I just kind of implemented the same style that he did at SMU, but kind of a different way of doing things, right?
Oh, without question. And I think they do want to develop guys, kind of like Gary Patterson made a name for himself of getting a Jerry Hughes or whatnot, or a Ty Summers, who's a quarterback out of the San Antonio area, turning him into a linebacker who reaches the next level, or Jerry Hughes was a running back and, of course, became an All-American defensive end. So, I think they would like to still develop guys on their own, so to speak, but they're also going to use the portal, and, whether it's a local kid who's looking to try and get back home or a disgruntled guy who may not be getting what he feels is the right number of snaps or whatnot. I think they're going to be very active in the portal and trying to supplement their rosters that way, as well as developing, the guys like Josh Hoover, the quarterback out of Rockwall Heath and whatnot, who they signed. But, yeah, I think it's definitely bringing an SMU type approach to TCU.
Drew Davison, Fort Worth Star-Telegram, has been on this show many, many times. Has covered the Cowboys, the Rangers, and now TCU as well with us on Sikkim 365 Radio. You mentioned Josh Hoover. He put up numbers, crazy numbers, had a great year last year, had a good year this year with Rockwall Heath under Mike Spradlin, who retired after the year was over. How much of a grab was it? Because he was Indiana, wasn't he? Almost forever, and then all of a sudden changed his mind. Was the Sonny Dykes the reason he changed his mind?
Yeah, just talking to Josh, he liked the idea of staying home. He never really considered SMU. I think he wanted to play at the Power 5 level. Indiana obviously gave him that opportunity. But, once a school like TCU opened up in his backyard and playing under a guy like Sonny Dykes, who's developed, the Jared Goffs and Davis Webbs and Shane Buechele's of the world, I think that really appealed to him. But I do think, the overriding factor is being able to play at a Power 5 level. And once the Texas school came into the mix, I think it was an easier decision for him to decommit from Indiana.
Drew Davison covers TCU for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram on Sikkim 365 Radio.
So tell us about Joseph Gillespie from Tulsa, new defensive coordinator. That was obviously a big hire that needed to be made. And Tulsa, not necessarily on everybody's radar. I followed them a bit because of Philip Montgomery, and I know they had a good defense with guys like Jackson Player. So your thoughts on what he brings to the table? Because obviously, Drew, there's been one guy running that defense for a really long time in Fort Worth. So this is new territory here.
Oh, yeah, without question. And it's going to be a new scheme, a new look for TCU. Gillespie runs the 3-3-5. Obviously, usually been a third down defense, and at Tulsa and whatnot, they kind of started running it as an every down defense and had a lot of success. And, Joe Gillespie's a guy who developed a first-round pick at Tulsa. Zavon Collins, who's with the Cardinals now, a couple years ago. And not many first-rounders come through Tulsa. So he obviously has an eye for talent and ability to develop some guys, but it's going to be a very new approach. I mean, for instance, we're talking about the portal. He's going to have to go out and find a nose tackle. I mean, TCU was not recruiting to play the 3-3-5 scheme, but obviously, with the new staff and whatnot, they're going to want a big nose tackle right there in the middle of it all. So, those are some options, some things they're going to have to adjust. But, he is a long-time high school football coach in Texas, coached at Stephenville, won a state title there. And I think Sonny Dykes is really excited to have him. Just of course, he went up against him a number of times, just SMU and Tulsa.
Yeah, in fact, I was going to bring that up. He's got Stephenville. They won the state title earlier. That's not a bad place to have a pipeline back into.
I bet he's at AT&T Stadium today, if they're allowed to be. Yeah, no doubt.
He needs to get in that number 2. I don't care what the guy's name, Aiken or whatever.
Yeah. Drew, were you surprised that Doug Meacham stayed?
Not really. I think TCU is a place he wanted to stay, and he was hoping to stay. He probably could have pursued maybe some OC opportunities more aggressively if he wanted to, but I think he's got a son or daughter going to school at TCU. I don't think he's really looking to leave Fort Worth. I mean, this is home. He went to Arlington Sam Houston High School. I think he likes being in the area, and of course, he recruited a lot of the kids on TCU's roster, so I think he has some loyalty to them, but. And as far as Sonny Dykes is concerned, I mean, you're keeping a guy who called plays for a top 40 offense last year, and a guy who's really plugged in with a lot of Texas high school football coaches. I was talking to one local coach who just raved about Doug Meacham, and he was also influential in getting a guy like Jalen Rager a few years ago, who obviously became a first-round pick and a pretty good player for TCU.
Yeah, single-handedly beat Baylor with 2 touchdowns a couple years back.
2017 or 18, yeah.
I'm curious, Drew. I mean, you dealt with Gary Patterson. I do say dealt. You dealt with Gary Patterson and covered him, the last few years. But what's it like to have somebody different now and talking to Sonny Dykes? Just is it a breath of fresh air in a way? And I know you want to be respectful as well, but just how different of a feeling is it when you're so used to one thing for so long?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely a breath of fresh air and a different way of doing things. And I've told people, obviously Gary Patterson way worked very well. They won 181 games, had some really good seasons, top 10 type seasons, obviously the Rose Bowl year and whatnot. So I think it's one of those things where there's just different ways to skin a cat, right? And Sonny Dykes is, somewhat the core values are kind of the same in terms of, playing fundamentally sound and things like that, but kind of how it's presented and whatnot is completely different. Sonny Dykes is all about open practices. He wants his players to, be as accessible as ever, and things like that, whereas Gary kind of wanted more to run a tight ship and kind of be the one voice, so to speak. Who knows? Not saying one way is better than the other. I mean, obviously, from a media perspective, you'd want more access, but it is hard to argue with Gary's track record and how he did things was successful for his program. But it is quite a 180 with Sonny Dykes.
Do you believe that it's true, that Gary Patterson could work at Texas?
I think so. I don't think he'll go as the defensive coordinator. From what I'm hearing, it's kind of more of an analyst type role, and I think, it makes sense. Gary always talked last season that he's a young 61 and whatnot. So, I think he still wants to coach. I think he's got a lot of energy, and Texas makes sense. Just in terms of familiarity with Chris Del Conte and obviously the Big 12 and getting guys ready to play against some of these offenses. So I certainly think it would make sense, but, I could also see him having other options, so to speak. So I think it's really going to come down to what he wants to do, but I certainly wouldn't rule out Texas.
Hey, Drew, thank you, man. Appreciate you as always.
Enjoy that new that fresh access, man, for real.
We had Tanner Mordecai on the show. We had Tanner Mordecai on the show two or three times during the season. Of course, Sonny Dykes as well. So thank you, Drew. Appreciate your time covering TCU and with some good stuff today on Sikkim 365 Radio.
Yeah, that's really interesting about the transfer portal. Like 20 guys out of the transfer portal, that's crazy. But, SMU's done that. They've really hit up the transfer portal, and they really feasted on guys that would leave Texas or OU or A&M or wherever and bring them into the fold. So, yeah, it's one thing about the transfer portal is you can very quickly kind of flip a ship by bringing in, the right guys, but that's a matter of do you hit on the right guys? Dave Aranda last year took 4 transfers, and he hit on pretty much every single one of them. The only one you'd say he didn't hit on was maybe Drew Estrada, but Drew Estrada, while he didn't receive 10 touchdowns or have 10 touchdowns receiving and 1,000 yards, he made some big catches in some critical moments.
And had a couple of games in which he was the main guy.
Yeah, where he was the number one guy. So he was a hit in that regard. So it's a hit or miss deal, but they've got a good track record with that. It's definitely going to be different. I think it's going to be more fun, quite frankly, to talk about TCU now with Gary gone. I do. I do think it's going to be more fun because they're not going to be that program that just seems pissed off at the world all the time because of their head coach. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Sonny can do up there, and obviously putting together a nice staff.
I thought it was cool. We had Sonny Dykes on last Thursday, a week ago Thursday, and also not only did he talk about his new program, but he was incredibly complimentary about where he was, and he should have been, with some of the players and what SMU still has.